It is a defeat that forces Hitler to turn his attention towards the ultimate goal, the conquest and annihilation of the Soviet Union.
The Soviet Union represented the nexus of everything that Hitler hated. He saw it as a bastion of communism and Judaism. And if it were not defeated, ultimately the Soviet Union would destroy Germany and destroy the Aryan race.
But there was also just sheer pragmatism here. The Soviet Union was the Großraumwirtschaft, the great economic space. They needed the raw materials, the oil, the food, and by annexing the Soviet Union, they'd be able to sustain a long war and fend off any British-American attacks.
June 22nd, 1941. Hitler launches Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. Across an 1,800-mile front, Hitler's army of over 4 million Wehrmacht troops surges forward, destroying everything in its path.
This was the largest army that had been assembled in the history of the world. And the Germans demonstrated an operational and tactical mastery that the Soviets simply could not match. And the barbarity is almost incomprehensible. Following the frontline troops, there were special action squads. Their purpose was to identify and murder political leaders and ultimately Jews in the occupied areas.
The slaughter of 1 million Soviets is the merciless testing ground for the Holocaust. The SS accelerate the genocide of Jews and others seen as undesirable. Over 9 million are slaughtered.
This was industrialized mass murder. This is something that hadn't even appeared in the Middle Ages.
By the winter of 1941, their brutal advance has brought them to the brink of victory. Leningrad is under siege, and German panzer divisions are at the gates of Moscow. Seeking a devastating tactical and ideological blow, Hitler turns his attentions towards Stalingrad.
Stalingrad was an important target for Hitler because he knew by taking it, he would insult Stalin. He also knew he would force Stalin to try to take it back, and he would be able to wear down the Red Army. But also it was an important city because it would permit him to pivot south into the Caucasus and take all these oil-producing regions and make Germany self-sufficient in petroleum.
For both sides, the stakes for the Battle of Stalingrad are immense.
For Hitler, to fail at Stalingrad would be an enormous blow to the Nazi myth. It would be an enormous blow to the war itself. Similarly, Joseph Stalin was unrelenting. He would not tolerate defeat. He would not tolerate pulling back. To surrender or to give ground would be met by the utmost sanction.
The Luftwaffe drop 1,000 tons of bombs on Stalingrad before 2.5 million troops clash.
The ferocity of the Battle of Stalingrad was something straight out of hell. It was not uncommon for battles to be raging, not over parts of the city or city blocks, but literally for different floors within one building. In some cases, Soviet reinforcements came forward without weapons, facing certain death. And yet, again and again and again, they came.
As the battle rages, the Red Army launches Operation Uranus. What Hitler's high command cannot see is revealed from space. Over 1 million Soviet soldiers outflank the German positions before cutting through the enemy's rear.
Operation Uranus was a complete shock, and suddenly Stalingrad was encircled.
Cut off from supply, the Germans are plunged into the harshest of Russian winters. In subhuman conditions, they begin to disintegrate.
It was freezing cold, food supplies began to decline, guns jammed. It was a nightmare. It's difficult to convey in simple words what that experience was like.
After 5 months under siege, Hitler's once mighty 6th Army capitulate, the first German field army to do so. Nearly 2 million have fallen, but for the Soviets, the tide is turning.
The boost to Soviet morale can scarcely be overstated. German prisoners were marched through Moscow, and this proved that the Nazi soldiers were not supermen. Instead, they saw German soldiers who quit, who surrendered, who could not match the determination of the Soviet soldier.
For Hitler, the defeat is devastating. Instinctively, he strikes back.
Adolf Hitler attempted to regain the strategic initiative to close a gap, a bulge, if you will, centered around Kursk.
Seen from above, Hitler's objective